This episode is brought to you by AARP. 18 years from tonight, Grant Gill will become a comedy legend when he totally kills it at his improv class's graduation performance. Knees will be slapped. Hilarity will ensue. That's why he's already keeping himself in shape and razor sharp today with wellness tips and tools from AARP to help make sure his health lives as long as he does. Because the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/healthyliving.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable Special Edition, where we dive deep into the secrets of the craft of audio, specifically from the side of the business, the people that work in the business. We are in service of the marketers responsible for supporting this industry financially. We call them the Chief Audio Officer. I am, as ever, your host, Dan Granger, CEO and founder of Oxford Road. Today's a special one for me, and I think it will be for you too. I was kind of early on this whole podcast thing because I started pushing for it first internally when I was at iHeart and Clear Channel back in 2006. That was really early to be talking about podcasts. But we're talking to somebody today that goes well before that and actually made this all possible. So it's sort of like I feel like an electrician that's about to talk to Thomas Edison here. So I have a lot of reverence for this conversation that we're about to have. And fortunately, we've spoken before, and I just know we've got a lot of fun topics. We're going to talk about media. We're going to talk about podcasting and its origins and where it is today and where it's going. And we might even get to talk about, we're recording this on Friday, June 28th, and this is the day after the presidential debate. We might even get to talk about that because I think media is playing a very significant role in what's happening even in our national election. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I just want to say welcome to our guest, the Podfather, the man who really, if anybody gets credit for the foundation of this industry, it is our guest, Adam Curry. Welcome, Adam.
Dan, thank you so much. Very nice intro. Yeah, it's good to be here. I was surprised when I got the call. I'm like, I think even when we talked, I said, Dan, are you sure you want to have me on? And my wife this morning says, does he know you?
Do I know about like the off the reservation, rabid, independent spirit? Like,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about your origins and some of the pirate radio stuff you did early on. And I don't think you've ever really gotten off of that boat.
No.
Is the way that it appears. So I'm ready for it. Look, we've had Rudy on this show. We've had America's Mayor and Newt Gingrich. We've had people that don't always have views that follow the script of what everybody wants. But I think that's where you and I were really fundamentally aligned on the importance to this channel, because it's about conversation, and it may be the only, but to me, it is definitely the leading platform to actually have a free and open exchange of ideas and to work through things where we're not just limited by sound bites, and we can actually unpack a thought and talk about, well, why do you see it that way? And what's your perspective? And maybe you have a perspective that's different than mine. Maybe I'll actually learn something if I shut up while you're talking and actually listen. So I think that's the whole point. And I think even though, you're really, you've really, I think, come at this as from a creator's perspective. Even though I come at it from the commercial perspective, I still think we're pushing for the same thing, which is like a sustainable ecosystem. And some of what I want to talk about with you is just like, what is your vision for how we preserve that? And I have my own views. But no, I'm glad you're here. And I mean, look, can we just start with yesterday for a second? I assume you watched.
Of course. It's part of what I do. Yes.
How are you feeling after the first, potentially last presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump? Because I think there's a lot of media implications here.
Yeah. Well, I've been deconstructing media for almost 17 years for the No Agenda podcast with John C. Dvorak. So we've had a couple of presidents under our belt. We've been through a lot of these cycles. What was most interesting here was well, no one can disagree with President Biden's performance. There could be disagreement over, I think, kind of the messaging out there in general is Biden blew it and Trump lied. That's pretty much what I hear from most of the media. But what was really most interesting to me was the lower thirds. It wasn't the talking heads, and I come from television, so I'm always looking at what are you putting on the screen, because that's very subliminal, the lower thirds. And right away, the lower thirds were Democratic insider, Biden has to go, sources say, all these
I saw the
non-attributed
exact
quotes,
same thing.
everything.
Yes.
So to me, that said setup. That was a setup, and there's only a couple of possible scenarios in my mind. One, President Biden is very powerful, and this was mutiny on the inside. Probably not that scenario, but it could be. Two, there's only we're very close to the Democratic convention and the election. Obviously, the only way to really make a switcheroo, which is exactly what everyone was talking about. The narrative was, well, should he step back? Should he go? The only way is for him to step back himself. And then, of course, the question is, who do you bring in? Now, we saw Gavin Newsom walking around. At this point in time, I really think that if I were to run a strategy, it would be President Biden, who has always said he would step back if he's even said, oh, I'll get sick and I'll step back. So for health reasons, Vice President Harris becomes president through to the election. You bring in you bring in someone else on the ticket. Honestly, I only think Hillary Clinton would be the most obvious choice. I don't know if she has a chance of winning against Trump, but there seems to be a lot of desperation. Maybe even more interesting, though, is what happened today. Under the cloud of this post-debate analysis is the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron deference case. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you will be. Chevron deference was put in place during the Reagan administration, and that's when all agencies were very pro-business, and the idea was Congress would write a law and the agencies could interpret that, particularly the EPA, as to drilling for Chevron, hence the name Chevron deference. Throughout the years, that has created an administrative state everywhere, EPA, FDA, CDC, FCC, you name it, where ambiguous laws written by Congress are interpreted by ever enlarged agencies. And with this overturning, which is really a big deal, it's not getting any play, of course, because we're all talking about other things. This changes everything, because now every agency just needs to execute the law. The law can no longer be ambiguous. If it's ambiguous, it goes to the court and not to the agencies for interpretation. This changes our lives in many ways.
Can you get a little more brass tacks on that one? So what's an example of how that could work in real life? What's a use case?
Well, the actual suit was brought by a fishing company who the EPA mandated that they would have to have an agency representative on every single boat that went out at their cost, which of course was ruining. They can't make money that way. They're just losing business. But this could come down to anything, mandating of medication to, I mean, even how broadcast regulation is interpreted. There's going to be a law. Can you have this many radio stations, television stations, and newspapers in the market or not? It won't be fuzzy wuzzy. Everything will have to be spelled out in law, and if not, it goes to court. And it's always just been agencies who have done this. The IRS, the same way. They interpret the tax code the way they want to. This is far-reaching. They've been trying to overturn this for decades, and here it is, all of a sudden, under the cover of this debate.
So you think the timing was strategic in that?
No, I think the Supreme Court wanted to go on vacation. They wanted to get everything out. Like, let's get it done. We're going on vacation next week. I think they just wanted to get it done. But I do think a lot of the animosity towards Alito and Clarence Thomas, sure, somewhat for political reasons about former President Trump, but definitely about this. There's a lot of power in the agencies.
Going back to the debate for a second, I saw, I think, what you saw and was paying attention to those lower thirds. And the thing I was asking myself is, were those written and like ready to go before the debate even started? Like, is this all
I'll tell you, man. You've been in control rooms. This is not just some Chiron person who pops it in and says, "Oh, I got a text message. Let me throw it in there." There's conversations, and it came quick.
And look, you've got a more of a reputation, which you probably own for, being conspiracy theory comfortable. You're willing to go on record and say things that I think don't follow the orthodoxy. I'm not that. Typically, that doesn't mean I think you're wrong. I don't necessarily have enough knowledge to have a point of view. In this particular case, it just felt like what was fascinating last night was that, we knew this was a scenario where the debate could go, but what I thought was the most jarring part of it was how orchestrated it felt immediately following. It felt like the assassination of Caesar. And Kristen Welker from Meet the Press, who's never, been somebody that, I think has been particularly tough on the president, just comes out and puts in the first blade. And then one after another, all of these friendly faces just start turning on the guy, and everybody rolls over. How do you raise money post an event like that? How do you maintain and go on in the face of that type of backlash from inside? So when you talk about mutiny, that's what I saw. And I felt that, it was probably a good thing for CNN for their business, because they actually made themselves highly relevant. I mean, they kind of just started the ball rolling on calling to replace a sitting president. And I have a feeling they're going to be successful in that. And I think there's going to be a lot of credit. So for that to come out of a media organization whose job is to sell advertising, it feels like something consequential in terms of the influence of what we might still call a traditional media network to actually influence change and orchestrate something so blatantly in front of everyone. I just thought I was taken aback by that.
Well, I'm a conspiracy therapist by trade, so you're safe with me, Dan. No worries.
Thank you.
I think we both saw the same thing. There was some form of a coup. It seemed like not everyone was in on it. Definitely not. But everybody took the same, as is typical with media. Everyone took the same line. Even this morning, I hear everywhere, you all got the same text. You got the calls. No one tells us who called or who texts. It's always
all
insiders, sources, Democratic strategists, consultants.
By the way, the best part was before it said sources say insiders of the Democratic Party. The first thing it said was breaking news.
Yeah,
so that was actually breaking news.
It was just breaking. It was just breaking. They didn't even say breaking news anymore, Dan. Just breaking, breaking. It's hair on fire. It makes it great for my business. It makes it very entertaining. I'm personally politically homeless. I love America. I love where America comes from. I think we are a great country. We can be a great country. Anyone who thinks that some daddy-o is coming into the White House and is going to fix all your problems is sorely mistaken. The issues we have in America, in our country, are at a local level. All politics is local. People have to get off Twitter and get into their city councils, their school boards. They have to get involved. We've kind of devolved into this, well, once the new king is here, everything's going to be all right. And that's just not true.
I might push back on you, and I think I'm probably getting a little bit out of my lane with this, but I do think that there's value in stability. And I think that people want to see it. I think businesses want to see it. I think the markets want to see it. And not that anybody's going to come in without, having made all of the Faustian bargains you have to make to get to that kind of level. But if somebody can come in and just de-escalate a bit, like for us to have one adult in the room who is able to be mature and coherent as the leader of the free world, I think that would have positive implications, even if it's just kind of a pretty, kind of a placeholder person. Like, I think we kind of need a template from either side right now. But what's interesting is this may actually cause that to take place. I don't know. I think for our purposes here, I think that last night maybe showed you call it a dead cat bounce, but I think that it was from a media perspective, something happened here that's going to affect all of us in the real world. And I think that this has happened on a cable news network when everybody's been talking about how cable news is dead. It's over now. The rebels have won, and it turns out there may be a little more gas left.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because this is actually, I think it's a problem for media, and in particular for cable news, because what you want and what we always have is it's close, it's neck and neck, it's a horse race. That's what brings in advertising from political parties. What's the Democrat Party going to spend money on right now? They have to rethink their strategy, whether it's with this person or with a different person. Right now, all the polls, everything shows who's leading. They need to bring it back. And this is why California is always a problem for media spend. No one spends a lot of media dollars in California during elections because it's always Democrat. So it's just like, what can we do? We're not going to spend all that much money. So they need to bring it back to, and when I say they, I mean the media needs to bring it back to a horse race, because that brings in money. I mean, that's my opinion is very clear on that. I was even surprised that CNN buckled to letting everybody broadcast this thing. How crazy was that? First, it was ABC, then it was MSNBC. It was all over X. I mean, there was no exclusivity on this thing. So we'll have to see how good it is. It may be good for ratings, but it's not good for political dollar spend at this point.
I think in the short term that may be true, but they were going to have that problem if they kept running this guy and they didn't just publicly assassinate his capabilities. I mean, his own team just dumped him in front of everybody, and which means you're going to have a lot of surprise. You're going to have new candidates being talked about. You might have somebody that's more formidable and shows up better in the polls. So I don't know. I think that they have established themselves as a place of importance in the net for the rest of this cycle. I would be surprised if this doesn't yield a positive return on investment for them. It's a bummer that the leaders of democracy in the world are really being impacted one way or the other, even if they're right in what they're doing, that's all kind of ties back to advertising dollars. But I guess such is life.
I mean, everything ties back to everything ties back to dollars in the end, no matter what. And the media is mainly run by, in my humble opinion, by pharmaceutical dollars. They seem to be the biggest ones. Everyone always counts on big dollars from political cycles. I mean, famous Les Moonves saying on a CBS or a Viacom call, like, "Hey, go Donald Trump. This is great. We get a lot more dollars in." So while they may have more viewers, we'll have to see if the blanketing of media, of political dollars, comes into media right away, or it will happen eventually. But I think it's hurtful more than anything.
You're going to have an interest. You're going to have good convention coverage, I think. And I think a lot of people are going to tune into CNN, but let's see how it plays out. The cool thing about this line of conversation is I think it very organically ties into you. And because you have worked, we've talked about you being a little bit off the grid sometimes with some of your views and the things you're willing to play with, but also you've worked inside of large media organizations. You've been part of the kind of corporate machine, and you've seen both sides of that. Can you talk a little bit about can you just share a little bit about your story of working outside and inside of corporate media and what has led you to where you are now? Because you do a show. I don't think we can buy ads on it.
Nope,
you've taken really strong
ads.
Positions, which is not really the main thing. The main thing is, what drives you and how you see the value of these platforms. But yeah, share a little bit about your story and how you've made decisions to push back against the industrial complex in media, so that you could really not be controlled by outside interests.
Okay, I'll try and work back a little bit. So, because of my background, I know that advertising is inherently censorship. If even you can't talk about a competing brand, I mean that's just a fact. My almost 8 years at MTV, I was a big part. I'm not anti-advertising, by the way. A big part of the marketing machine that MTV was. My most favorite example of that. And by the way, when I got there, cable wasn't real. People were like, hey, this is phony. This is not real television. No one's going to advertise on it. And it was hard. It was very hard to get advertisers. My favorite is MTV Spring Break, where people thought, wow, these guys are so smart. They go into where their audience is on the beach, and initially it was in Florida, but we expanded to South Padre Island and even into the Caribbean at a certain point. The whole reason, and I was part of that pitch to do MTV Spring Break, was to get Anheuser-Busch to advertise on the channel. I did the pilot for them, and we showed them exactly, hey, you're going to have these big bottles of beer on the stage, and this is where your audience is. This is where the belly flop contest with a bunch of drunk frat boys, and we successfully sold it to them. And that was the entire idea behind MTV Spring Break. So, and that showed me a lot of the machine. I say the other one from a business perspective, of course, the music business has changed significantly. MTV desperately wanted Michael Jackson on the MTV Video Music Awards, which, by the way, we weren't allowed to say VMAs. For some reason, that changed, but we had to say Video Music Awards. And the deal was, one, we would give him an award, which would be the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard Award of the Year, I think maybe even the decade. And the award would be named after him in perpetuity, which of course has already didn't happen. So part of that, I actually had to go to Los Angeles and give him this award. He wanted me specifically, which wasn't convenient for me at the time because my wife was about to have a baby. And so everyone tied themselves in some amazing knots, including flying in my mother-in-law on Concorde from Europe to be with my then wife. So that's how big the business stuff was. And we would also do this Michael Jackson weekend. And the way MTV worked, on Thursdays, we tape for, on Fridays, we tape for Saturday and Sunday. And Thursdays we tape for Saturday and Sunday. Fridays we tape for Monday. And so it'd be called a 48. So we'd be doing, and we never watched the videos. It was just the segments we were doing. And it was a Michael Jackson weekend. We had the premiere of, I forget which video it was. And on Friday, we all got called, and we got to come back. We have to redo the entire weekend. Why? Because in the contract, which stipulated this weekend and Michael Jackson would perform on the Video Music Awards, was the award itself, we had to say Michael Jackson, the king of pop. And that had not been communicated from the office down to the studio. So we had to go back and redo every segment and say, Michael Jackson, the king of pop. So that just shows you, that to me, by the way, is a weird version of censorship. It's speech controlling, basically. But, hey, I work for the man, so it was okay. When it came to podcasting, now I've always been I started as a radio pirate broadcaster in the Netherlands, and
what does that mean? Can you just give us a little bit on that chapter of your life, because that's formative stuff.
Yeah, when I moved to the Netherlands, my parents moved there for work when I was 7 years old. It was very much a socialist country. It still is, but the media was, you really had 4 radio stations, all government controlled, and 2 television stations that came on at 7 p.m. and went off air at 11:30. And there was one pop music station, and they came on the air at 7, went off the air at 11:30, and they played like Lawrence Welk and Hoompa music. It was that was the popular music at the time. So it wasn't really what was out there and living. In the North Sea at the time, you had these pirate radio ships, which were in international waters. Radio Caroline, Radio Veronica, Radio Mi Amigo. I mean, they were playing the stuff of the 60s and 70s. They were playing the Stones. They were playing Dylan. They were playing Deep Purple. I mean, they were playing stuff that you could not get on the radio. And so I grew up kind of listening to that. Also, Wolfman Jack on Radio Luxembourg on medium wave. So, kids are always desperate for the music, right? So it's hard you'll do anything to get the latest, coolest stuff, particularly if it's kind of radical. So I grew up being kind of in that vibe, and I loved radio. I built my first transmitter when I was 13 years old. My mom drove me around the block to see how far the signal reached on the car radio. And I kind of got into that through a closed circuit hospital radio station, very captive audience. But, that's where I learned my chops, and they had a professional studio. And then I met a guy and he said, hey, we've got FM pirates now in Amsterdam. And there's this 1 decibel radio, and we think you'd be cool if you come over and do a show in English. And they had a connection with an import record store who was getting 12 inches mainly from Chicago Warehouse stuff, Frankie Knuckles. I mean, this was Madonna days. This was 80, 81 when the first time she released a Holiday and Borderline, that whole album, was re-released later. And so we were playing all kinds of amazing music that you couldn't get anywhere. And our reach was just Amsterdam. It's not small, but at the time it was probably 700,000 people. And there were multiple pirates with different genres. It was very much like a radio landscape. And we had ads. It really just kept the rent going. And, from time to time, the FCC would come in, we'd get busted. They'd take all our gear. We'd be back on the air within 12 hours. And it was kind of that's just kind of how it went. It was not, you didn't go to jail if you did not for very long, just a couple hours. And that's really how I really got into radio and really loved the interaction of radio. I later went on one of those pirate ships became legal, and they got certain amounts of airtime on the big government run
when you
stations.
say pirate ships, and I've heard you talk about this before. So
it was
literally pirate radio, literally on a boat, on a floating vessel.
Yes, in international waters.
You couldn't have been more literal.
Yeah, well,
so you started. Hold on, let's just be clear about something. This is an important origin story piece here.
I was never on the ship. I was too young to be on the ship.
All right,
but the guys who were on the ship inspired us on shore. And then when they came on shore, they had so many fans that they actually had enough signatures to get airtime on the public station, which in the Netherlands was actually divvied up by religious group. You had the Roman Catholics, the evangelicals. It was very interesting. To this day, it's still that way, even though they have commercial radio and television now. And so they had a Friday. They had the whole Friday, and so I got brought in to do a show with a buddy of mine Friday evening from 7 to 10. And they had 1 hour on television a week, and they made a music show with music videos. And because Holland at the time was very much the gateway to Europe, everyone came through Holland to do their concerts. So, and to promote their records, and I was an English speaker, so everybody came in. They all wanted to be on the show because we had a lot of reach, but also, and it was that dude speaks English. The interviews weren't like Mick Jagger, tell me, where does the song go about? So I could, and it was fun, and so I met everybody. Everybody came through, and it was fantastic. It was, I think it was Sammy Hagar who said, "Dude, you should go talk to the people at MTV." And this was probably about 85, so MTV had already been on the air for a while.
What year did MTV launch?
81, August 1st, 81.
Yeah.
But in 87, when I got there, because they literally just called me at my desk at the radio station and said, "Hey, you want to come and work for us?"
You had the hair already? You already had the whole look and vibe? All right, so you were perfect. Yeah. Okay.
I was good to go.
You were turnkey.
Turnkey operation.
Yeah.
But at that moment, MTV had gone to basic cable, which was 40 million households. So that meant a whole bunch of things. One, no blue content, no cursing. You had to be kind of careful what you said because we didn't want to get kicked off basic cable. And it also meant the full commercialization of the station, which was fantastic to witness. And I'll just speed through the MTV part and say that from a business perspective, they made the absolute right choice once they saw that long form programming, which kind of, the real world a little bit, but it was really remote control, the game show with Ken Ober. They were getting a 1.0, 1.1 rating, and that was double what you'd usually get on MTV. We would hover it during the day between 0.2, 0.4. So from a business perspective, that made so much sense. At the same time, music videos were becoming a commodity. So they'd already purchased BET. They already had VH1. It's like the internet was coming, although that's a whole nother funny story because they didn't believe in it. And apparently they don't anymore either, because they've been erasing archives. They saw that they had to diversify, and along with that came longer form music programming too. So we had Yo MTV Raps, which is a daily show, but also a weekly show. But it really moved into more of the reality space. And they made great business decisions and left us kind of with a period of time in history that only a certain group of people share, and it's never coming back.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I'm Gen X, and so this was CNN, this was Walter Cronkite, right? And this was maybe I think the end of shared consciousness in this culture, where we saw the same movies, commercials,
Sure.
TV shows, and so that was significant. And I mean, just as trivia, I do remember going, why on music television don't they play music anymore? Like, why did they decide to make that change? And that was perplexing, but I mean, I'm sure they're just following the money. More importantly, I think the cultural impact when you were there, did you feel like you were a part of something that had importance beyond just being a good commercial asset?
Um, oh, importance is an interesting question. I do feel, see, I was born in September 3rd, 1964, and there's this ongoing argument with people. Am I a boomer or am I Gen X? Because it's kind of
Yeah.
right on the cusp. And I think I can say for sure I was the face and voice of Generation X. So I feel
For
good
sure.
about that. I feel good about that. At the same time, I think we also ushered in an entire age of stuff that really didn't turn out well. So when we were all rocking and rolling in the late 80s, early 90s, myself included, mea culpa. I wasn't paying attention to who was on city council or what was happening, at a local level. Like, we got sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Who needs all that nonsense? And we really took our eye off the ball. And it was very much a me kind of generational thing. And I think MTV, yes, it was a generation, and we all felt kind of connected through it. But I don't necessarily think that it turned out that great because we took politics to the level of boxers or briefs. I don't think it was. I don't think it was really good for society as a whole. I mean, I'm not against it, but it indirectly it led to TikTok, Instagram, etc. I mean, that it has been a progression all the way through.
Well, but so what would you say underneath that? And I use the word important because I think that can go both ways in terms of, is that a helpful thing or a harmful thing, or is probably inevitable in some form, right? You can't stop what's coming, but the way that it played out, do you feel that it caused a negative change in people's lives, on balance?
No, I think it was positive at the time, but I think there was no long-term view. We were just vomiting media.
Got
I
it.
mean, and we did everything. We broke all the rules. We shot over the axis. We did jump cuts.
Right.
We literally, it was rebellious. It was
Hmm.
also very much guerrilla television. I mean, it was much less sophisticated than you might think. When I got there were two cameras, no makeup, no wardrobe. The lighting guy came in once a week, said, "Stand there, boom, boom, boom. That's your spot. I'll see you next week." I mean, it was very unsophisticated, but longer term, we didn't really do much for for the world or society. We did a lot for commercial music
Well,
and for media. We showed that you can do a lot with very little resources and be successful at it.
it's interesting though, because I was just watching this old PBS series on the history of the city of New York. And what's unique about, one of the things that's unique about New York is that it's like the only major city that was not founded for religious reasons, but simply for commercial. But as a byproduct of that, people were able to come in that didn't have the same opportunity in other places. And they were actually able to get a platform to, over generations, build a life and a quality of life that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. They had to go through great hardship. A lot of people suffered in the process, but it created opportunity. And I wonder, if we're doing pros and cons of, the revolution, that you were a part of. I do think a lot of voices were platformed that weren't before. I do think that it was different than, there was a new segment that was being spoken to that really didn't have a place before, other than what our parents could identify with. And I think that, so there probably were really great advantages to just the freedom of expression that was made possible there and the different perspectives that were brought to the table. But that's not to say it wasn't, narcissistic, commercial, and shallow, right? But in that process, good things are happening too. Like, I believe good and bad can all be happening at the same time, right? But it did feel significant culturally.
I'd say the big thing that MTV did, which also I feel has turned out bad, is it birthed hip hop. Once hip hop was brought onto the channel, all props to Ted Demme and Dr. Dre and Ed Lover, and those guys did a great job. It brought in it commercialized hip hop, and now we've gotten to a point where I don't know if you listen to any hip hop radio, or it's an amazing category. It's a lot about black men killing other black men. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy category. That's not all that it is, but the amount of it that's there is, to me, is very disturbing. And I think that's the commercialization that was built up with East Coast, West Coast. A lot of that played out on MTV, and it still plays out today.
Yeah, as somebody that, look, I'll jump from, Streisand and Sinatra to Lil Wayne. So I try to cover the gamut, but what I hear a lot of times is what you're describing. A lot of times it's nothing to do with that. It may be about instant gratification through various means, but look, I think that's maybe a different podcast to have a conversation about that. I
told
did
you an
interview
hour is
a
too
guy
short,
one time.
Dan. It's too short.
Yeah. No, we can't. We're not even. I don't even. We're getting into stuff we probably let's go back to.
Let's promise
to
to do that.
media.
Let's promise to pick that up sometime. We'll pick that up for sure.
Well, I did an interview with a guy, and I'm losing his name right now, but he was a reporter that has followed the hip hop beat since the beginning, and he wrote a book about the history of hip hop and the financial story behind the story. And it was really fascinating. Like there's a much broader discussion that arguably you and I may not even be qualified to have by many standards. But yeah, let's bookmark that one for the part 2 of this.
I will plug real briefly. I've done 96 episodes of Mo Facts with Adam Curry, MOEFACTZ. Mo and I are both American men. He's black, I'm white. We have gone through a lot of this. So that's a podcast that is evergreen. You can listen to anytime. And we should definitely pick that up sometime.
I love that. And the guy I'm talking about is Dan Charnas, and the book is called The Big Payback, on the history of the business of hip hop. And
cool.
It is a fascinating conversation. Okay, pop quiz. Have you ever heard of these companies? Shopify, Bayer, Oracle, Indeed, Masterclass, Babbel, Tommy John. We could go on. I don't just host the Media Roundtable podcast, but I have the good fortune of being the CEO of a company called Oxford Road, where we are the world's leading independently owned and operated agency specializing in audio. Think podcasts, radio, and streaming. And what that means is that we get to help great companies worth fighting for, grow with audio advertising, whether it's podcasts, radio, or streaming, and all its various tentacles. This includes media planning and buying. We do analytics, attribution, and insights. We also have a special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. It's our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. Bottom line is, we don't just work here. Audio is our passion, and we want to lead this industry to new heights beyond what we've ever seen so far. That's why we've been leading the industry in brand safety and suitability, and actually bringing you solutions to market so that you can evaluate the way that you get placed in a show so that it matches up with your values, in addition to avoiding the things that might be problematic for your brand. If you're a chief audio officer and you're looking to get best in market performance at maximum viable scale, do get in touch with us at oxfordroad.com.
Or if you love audio and are strategic, relentless, and looking for a career change, consider joining our mission as a fellow agent of influence. Just flip us your resume through oxfordroad.com. And if you're working anywhere in the audio industry and you're serious about this business, make sure you go to oxfordroad.com. Easy to spell. Sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer, at oxfordroad.com. And make sure you mention that you heard about us on the Media Roundtable podcast.
So anyway, listen, but okay, so you're at MTV, you're a part of that. It's very commercial. You decided at some point you were going to be part of a new wave, maybe for the third time. But this time you were going to kind of come out from the belly of the beast of commercial media, and you went down a new path. Can you connect those dots? And was that deliberate? Was that a strategic decision?
Yeah, you're skipping a few pieces. I saw the internet coming in 1992. I registered MTV.com. I'd always been online before the web, and I was using a Gopher server, which was text-based, hyperlink text-based. And, you know, I'm nerdy, so I was kind of playing around with that. And back in those days, you registered MTV.com, you sent an email to the guy, and he said, okay, here it is, you're done, you're good to go. There was no cost. And he just put it in some spreadsheet that he was maintaining. And I was using it on the air. I had MTV.com. I was just putting up stories on very simple. Actually, it was the Gopher server first. Then this kid from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, emailed me and said, "Hey, try this thing, man. This is this new HTTPD server. It's and we've got this called a browser." That was Mark Andreessen. He was still at school, so we set that up with the Mosaic browser. And I had Adam at MTV.com as an email address, and we were on news groups. And so I would poll people, because I did the top 20 countdown. I would be polling what the college kids were interested in while the top 20 countdown was playing on MTV. And they were giving me very different feedback about what they thought should be in the top 10. Of course, at the time, the college demographic didn't even count for the rating. So it was a very interesting time for me personally. And I got permission from MTV to use that, because here's a legendary quote. Yeah, you can do whatever you want on that internet thing. We're good because we have the AOL keyword, so we're fine. So at a certain point, I around 94, I was like, okay, I've got to get in this internet thing. I'd already been doing a syndicated radio show, Adam Curry's Top 30 Hit List. So I had a business infrastructure that I could lean on. And my two partners, Ron Hartenbaum and Gary Schoenfeld from Media America, they decided to set up a company with me, and we'd figure out exactly what we were going to do. And I left MTV. I quit on the air after number one. And so that was very deliberate, to answer your question.
You quit on the air. Was that like a Jerry Maguire type of situation, but broadcast, or was that?
No, it was broadcast.
Low drama.
No. It's like, hey, and Beck was number one with Loser, which was kind of funny. I said, that's number one. This will be my last show. I'm going to go on the internet, and I'll see you there. And I just walked out and never came back.
Wow.
But I just had a process. You know, I was like, oh, I really believe in broadcasting on the internet. I didn't know what it meant. So I started a company called OnRamp, and the first, I had like one kid from Cornell and a ADSL line, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And I found a partner, Ron Bloom, and he knew the guys at the Grammys at Naris, and we went out to LA. We pitched Green, I think was his name. We pitched him to do the first cybercast of the Grammys. And he said, that's great. What's a cybercast? And so we didn't really know, but we had See You, See Me video, 1 frame a second. Casio had just come out with their digital camera. So we said, look, we'll have behind the scenes, we'll have writers, and we'll have pictures, and it'll be great. And he said, okay, that's a good idea. We'll let you do that. Here's, it'll cost you $1 million for the license. Now, we don't have any money for the license. We worked it out. Okay, no license fee, but you can't go to our advertisers. Okay. So we went to Visa, because they had MasterCard, and we went to Casio, who had the camera. And we got a little bit of money we had to share some of that back with Naris, of course. And we set it up. We did the cybercast of I want to say it was the 65th Grammy Awards. I can't remember what it was. It was 2006, 1996. And then, you know, so that was great. I mean, it was cute. I mean, it's probably still out there on the Wayback Machine. And then we went back to the office, and maybe there was 3 people in the company at this point, and, you know, nothing's happening. Like, what are we going to do? You know, this money's not going to last very long. And then the phone rings, and it's I pick it up, said, "Hello, on-ramp. Yeah, this is Robert McCauley from Anheuser-Busch. Can I talk to your sales department?" "Oh, sure, Mr. McCauley. Hold on." Put on my different hat. "Yeah, sales department here." And so Bob McCauley from Anheuser-Busch, he said, "You know, we saw this thing. We want to be on the internet. Come to St. Louis." And that really started the whole thing for me. Is we built Budweiser.com, we built BudLight.com. We learned an incredible amount. What a gracious bunch of people they were. You know, it's very different now, of course. It's been sold to the Belgians. It was a very buttoned down company, you know, monogrammed cuffs and everything. You go out to dinner and like, "Hey, I'd like a scotch." "You can have a scotch as long as you have a Budweiser with it." You know, it's this kind of deal. And from that, we parlayed that into a company that we actually took public called Think New Ideas. And we were building big corporate websites, Planet Reebok. We built Wood Continental Airlines on the web with the first ticketing. We did.
So you had a web development business.
One of the first. Yeah, one of the first.
And it's starting, you said 96?
Yeah, around 95, 96.
That's
yeah.
unbelievable.
So that was Silicon Alley. You had agency.com, you had Razorfish, all these different, Jason Calacanis was, he was a reporter. He was a reporter, Silicon Alley, you know, he was reporting on stuff. So, and we built that up to 450 people. We had about $500 million in revenue. It was, you know, I ran the New York office with the chief technology officer. Then we took it public. Omnicom wanted to buy us, and we said, "No, we want to experience going public," which was good for the experience, but I don't recommend it necessarily to everybody. And this was a little bit before the .com bust, so we didn't raise hundreds of millions of dollars. We had a very modest IPO, but all of a sudden, you know, I'm wearing suits. You know, we're reporting every quarter, and so I decided that I wanted out in '99 and went back to Europe. And the company was profitable. It actually merged later with another company, became AnswerThink. I think it's still ANSR. I think it's still around today.
Oh, wow.
And then I was sitting around thinking, what am I going to do? And I did a whole bunch of dumb, you know, I was flush with cash. I was, you know, I bought castles and helicopters and burnt money in the air and all the fun stuff you do. Yeah. Oh, no. I spent it all. And, but in that process, and I truly believe I got it from God, podcasting came to me. And that was through a whole bunch of things that were just brought into my view. Dave Weiner with RSS. I came up with the idea of an enclosure. And then I saw the first iPod and it clicked right away. I'm like, I saw the iPod. That's not a jukebox. That's not a Walkman. That's a radio receiver. It looked very much like this one that my grandmother gave me. Wow. You know, same kind of size. Like, hey, that's a radio, and I know how to do it, and I understand how we can put these pieces together. A guy named Kevin Marks, he helped me with the Apple script, and then I just started podcasting. We didn't have a name for it, and I did the Daily Source Code, which is a daily show meant to attract developers to come to this idea and build applications. We didn't have apps back then. We had applications for Windows and Mac and Linux. And so we could get this podcasting thing started. And then, you know, that just kept going. It caught steam. And then Steve Jobs called and said, do you have a minute? Yeah, I have a minute. And I had an hour-long meeting with him. It was really nice. Of course, you know, he was just really friendly and gracious. And he said, "Adam, I want to build radios for you." And he got it. He understood what the dream was. And of course, he also then created the Radio Dial, which was iTunes. And, you know, kind of the rest is history from there.
Okay, hold on. A quick detour on this. Sometimes I think about the labels we use in our industry, right? What is a podcast is still a topic, right? And when we think about ourselves, we talk about audio. So we talk about radio, streaming, podcast, right? But sometimes I think, should the whole freaking thing just be called radio? How do you think about the medium of sound as a commercial platform, whether it's on demand or not, what should the label be?
If you look at radio or television, these are transmission protocols. They don't necessarily describe the content. A podcast is a transmission protocol. Anything that you can say wherever you get your podcast is a podcast. That was the whole idea, was you have a feed, which is kind of your transmission stream, and in it you have enclosures, and whatever that enclosure is, whether it's an MP3, an MP4, a PDF, honestly, that is a podcast. It is a transmission protocol. It's not the best name, but it's the name that we were given and the name that we got stuck with. I personally like audio podcasts. I think that's the magic of the whole podcasting genre, is you can listen to it while you're doing something else. It's very personal. It's usually in your ears, but you can be listening to it in the car. I think when people say they have a podcast on YouTube, it's not a podcast because it's not using that transmission protocol. You're doing a YouTube. That's different. And I also think most people listen to the YouTube. They may glance over, or maybe, on the app locked on their screen in their pocket. So it gets a little fuzzy. But for me, technically, anything that it uses that transmission protocol of RSS with enclosure is a podcast. Adam Curry, the content maker, it's audio. I don't like video. I don't like it. It's too much effort. I feel it's too much effort for the return on an investment. And I love the theater of the mind. You're seeing a little bit of my studio. Most people have no idea. They don't know what I look like when I'm doing it, what I'm dressed like. I can do lots of things. I can get close to the mic and have a nuance. I can do all kinds of things that you can't do in video.
Yeah, but we got to have something we can use. Look, I like podcasts. I don't have a problem with it, but what happens when, the podcast is being consumed through a Pandora stream, and it's a totally different way of distributing it, or if it's live, is it still a podcast then? And how, and I'm trying to, because I think one of the things that holds the industry back, and again, this is me with my commercial hat on, but I feel like it's a little bit hard to deal with. It's a little bit unique. Its powers, I think, are greater to drive influence, and I actually think any other type of channel. It has advantages that other channels don't have, but in terms of the usability to transact on, there's a lot of limiting factors, and some of that is just confusion about what it is and where you draw the lane lines. And so I'm an advocate for something that's expansive, that can flex whether or not it's streamed or on demand, or through YouTube or elsewhere. So I'm hoping we can land on something that becomes universal. But I also, I guess if I were the inventor of the medium of podcasting, I might want to hold on to that one too.
But let me
yeah.
expand on that, because again, it comes down to the transmission protocol. The power of podcasting is you can say wherever you get your podcast. If you put a video file in there, almost every podcast app will play that video file.
Yeah,
if you put an audio in there, every single play. Most of them will actually show you a PDF, funny or not. So to me,
really,
oh yeah, you'd be surprised. It's just the media, and if it doesn't, it can be done easily. But that's the power of it. The power is you have one little feed that you control. You can put on a server at your home if you want. You can add your little MP3 file, and it can go out to all of these platforms. Almost no one understands how that works. People say, hey, you haven't uploaded the show to Apple yet. No, actually, that's not how it works. Apple is very slow in updating. But the beauty of podcasting is I don't need anybody to put up a podcast. I really don't. I don't even need a lot of money, just enough to have a cable modem. And, it may not be scalable, but I can certainly do it. And Dave Wine and I, we don't agree on a lot of things. We certainly agree on that. That was always the idea, that you don't need a platform for distribution. The distribution is all of these different applications and platforms that can ingest it. Spotify distorted this market by trying to take it all and do exactly the opposite of what it was intended to do, and they failed. They tried to pull it all in, say, we're the big daddy. We're going to spend all this money. We're buying the hosting companies. We're buying the talent. We're putting it all in one place. And they couldn't scale. They couldn't get enough people to listen to Michelle Obama's podcast, because the beauty of podcasting is you can get it everywhere, not just on one platform. That's what's so powerful about it. It's also inherently difficult to monetize it through advertising because of the way it was set up. And that's the contortion that the podcast industrial complex has gone through, mainly saying, well, you got to do video if you want to make money. No, what you're saying is you need to get on YouTube, because the YouTube can count and YouTube has an advertising system built in. Podcasting was developed on downloads. I'm not saying it's appropriate still, but it was developed on downloads because it took 20 minutes to download a whole podcast back in the day. So surprise, surprise, when Apple changes in iOS 17 and switches off the automatic downloading, oh, we got some make goods to do. Yeah, because people weren't actually listening to them. The whole thing was not built for today's media metrics, for CPM-based advertising, certainly not for dynamic advertising. That's not to say that I don't have ideas about how it can work. I just think that we've gone in a very bad direction for monetizing podcasting. And the main thing is, we're not talking about the content anymore. It's either brand safe or it's not brand safe, but what is it actually doing? That's the part that is being overlooked. I can stay with you for another 15 minutes.
Well, but you just said the magic words, and we haven't even gotten off of the technical. I don't even know how to start a conversation with you about brand safety right now. But listen, we just talked about the technical a little bit, but I want to before we talk commercial, I want to talk about go back to this word of importance. Because you said what it is supposed to be, what you believe that it is. And if you suspend the technical aspects of distribution, why does it matter so much? Why, in your view, is it actually important?
Oh, thank you for this question. Because everybody has a community they can speak to. It's not going to be big. In almost every single case, it's going to be very small. And this was always the intent. You have communities of interest, and you have communities of geography. Radio comes from a community of geographic location, which, by the way, we've completely given up on, and I'll come back to that. So the idea
this needs to be an 11-part.
Oh, it's fine, Dan. Yeah. I would love to do 11 parts.
Every one of these is important. Every topic that we're touching is important.
Well, and I want the chief audio officers out there to listen to what I'm saying, because there is an opportunity here. So again, now you're always going to have, just like music, where no one's making money anymore, that you're always going to have J-Lo. You're always going to have, your top sellers. They're going to be there. The majority are struggling artists who make money on merch and gigs, and that's about it. And by the way, almost no one's making money through the streaming systems. There's nothing but complaints. Most of the money goes to Taylor Swift. We all know it. Now in radio, just like everything else, the internet broke that. So what happened is we consolidated. I've known Elvis Duran since he was in Austin selling weed. This is before I moved to Austin. It's a long time ago, and I was on Z100, and he was here in Austin. And a good guy. He came into Z100, and now he's not doing a new. I was on Z100 with Scott Shannon. I did weekend shows. I did the Morning Zoo for a whole summer with Michael Pelka, and it was fantastic. And Ross Britton. Oh my God, it's coming back. But now it's, Elvis speaks to 8 different markets. And yeah, the sweepers are Z100, New York, New Jersey, Elvis Duran, but he's not talking local. That's all gone away because of one big change. Facebook took away all the local advertising, and it's very effective. So local ads on radio are a problem. Also, the financials became so distorted that we have 20 minutes of advertising to 40 minutes of programming, if that, across the board, every single station. And it's all network-based stuff. So we've left this entire void, and this, I'm kind of bringing it around real quick for you. We've left this incredible void for local-based programming, which I believe should be podcasts. We have enough general entertainment podcast stuff that we done by comedians, and almost all of that is political one way or the other. We have enough of that. It's just, oh, well, there's going to be a couple of people who rise to the top and who get enough enough virality that they can get ads that keeps them going. But that's never what we weren't thinking about money when we invented podcasting. We think about how can the church have their own radio show? How can the school superintendent have his or her own radio show? How can we have all these different shows that are out there that people can use this medium, and you can listen to it anywhere? How can the book author explain his thoughts? This is what podcasting was for. And I think the big opportunity, if someone wanted to do it, and it's a big lift, is you can still create and I had a podcast network. I raised $65 million, failed. It doesn't work. The only thing I think that is left, and it's a huge gaping hole, is to create a network of local-based programming. The United States is perfect for something like this. And then you can have a run of network with one or two sponsors, going back to the old days, who would have to invest in this network. I mean, really have to invest to make that work. Otherwise, I mean, we're just kind of flapping our gums. It's like there's no good measurement. There's just no scale to it. We don't even have to talk about the brand safe content. You can't automate this podcasting thing because it's decentralized. By definition, it doesn't fit into the old monetization models, other than what I call the value for value model, which was kind of always the way I set my shows up, is, hey, if you get any value out of this show, support me, send me some money. And I've been doing that for almost 17 years, and that's been working okay.
I want to react to a few of the topics you
please
threw
Dan.
out there, and then I want you to react to me, and I know that's going to eat the rest of your time.
Well, I'm going as long as I can with you, man.
So listen, so here's my perspective. I think fundamentally the importance of what we're doing is about, it's been pirate radio the whole time.
Yes.
That's the point. It's about democratizing conversation and allowing people to reach anybody. And I think, one of the things that you've demonstrated over the course of your career is that as the world evolves and gets more decentralized, the importance of local shifts. It's not important. It is important. It is underserved. The local news business is dead. It's been defunded. But I actually think it will rise again in a new form that I actually don't think we've quite seen yet, because we haven't gotten the critical mass of consumption in regions to make it commercially viable. So I think it's going to take a minute. I think we have to be patient. And I say this as somebody that sold local advertising for 10 years. It's too important not to return, but what it will be is not exactly what it was in local, because local specialization is local. Affinity groups are local. You and I are doing this over these, whatever it is that gets me to you and you to me right now. You can still connect with people and form communities in other places, which has kind of diversified the regional aspect, the geographical aspect of it. But that is going to have to happen. I live in the Santa Clarita Valley, and there is I believe the best business model in the world is to copy What's Up SCV, which is an email list and a Instagram profile, and it is a user-generated feed of local content. They have a podcast, they do events. They're a multimedia conglomerate very focused on a small, tight geography that everybody in that geography consumes, because it's the only game in town, and it costs nothing to produce. They don't need anybody's permission. They don't need a broadcast license. I think that is a window into the model of the future that audio is going to play an important part in, but we have not yet achieved the concentration of listeners to make that something that somebody can do as a full-time job. But the important part is that there is a protected space for people to communicate what's most important to them without I would say an unsustainable amount of, what you called censorship earlier. I think we need some version of censorship. There have to be boundaries that govern things before they can be commercially viable. But my hope is, and kind of converting to the brand safety topic, I don't think it should just be anybody says anything anywhere and they can make money doing that. There needs to be some checks and balances. The problem is we're so disorganized. It's going to take us a century to sort out the open internet anyway. But in the meantime, you've got brands kind of acting as the FCC going, that's okay and that's not okay. So the big thing we're doing in brand safety to make it possible to have a different opinion on anything, whatever it is you want to talk about, is to say, all right, look, let's make space for any view on any subject. But if you can't do it in a way that's respectful, if you can't do it without including personal attacks, then there's going to be a tax for that, and the market's going to dictate the value of that tax, because they don't want to be caught in the crossfire of people that are attacking each other. And the culture war is real, and it is toxic for brands. If you can get them to get away from like the GARM framework for brand safety and suitability, which is 11 things that technology is not actually able to accurately detect, it is a racket that it has become. It's not intended to be that way. Good thinking people were behind it, but it is decimating creators' ability to earn in this space because of the oversensitivity and inaccuracies of the tolerance levels. So what we're trying to do is just like, let's simplify a little bit. If profanity is a problem for your brand, let's measure profanity. AI tech can do that. They're free to say what they want on these platforms, but that doesn't mean you need to sponsor it. Same thing with personal attacks. Those two metrics, I think, are fair. They're objective. They're not as easily politicized. And it's not just selective picking of, brands are safe here because they have the right views and not here because they have the wrong views. I think those are metrics that we can actually use. And that's what we're trying to push out into the ecosystem to make it more sustainable and to protect what I think we are very much aligned on, which is preserving the free and open exchange of ideas and giving people the ability to communicate with people that are interested in what they have to say wherever they are. So those are my reactions.
The piece missing from this conversation, and not ours, but the conversation in general, is why, if someone is going into podcasting to make money, stop. Why am I in podcasting? Because I'm a pirate radio broadcaster, because I wanted to share something with my audience. The only way it works, by the way, is in most cases, is if you have an active feedback loop. I mean, we call value for value time, talent, treasure. So we've never built a website. We've never set anything up for us. We don't even, our own hosting is all done by our audience. We have boots on the ground. So experts in every field, it is their duty as producers. We don't call them listeners, we call them producers, to send us their expertise when appropriate. So it's an ongoing dialogue and conversation. I do that because I love it. We weren't making any money for hundreds of episodes, but we loved doing it. This is exactly what happened with blogs. And we're like, oh, I'm going to do a blog, I'll make money. Yeah, and now we're at, what's the CPM on? Well, yeah, isn't it even a CPM on blogs? It's like a click through of a penny. By the way, YouTube is like, CPM is like a buck 50 or something. I mean, it's very hard to make money on that, on that type of level. So you have to go back to, what am I doing this for? So, it's not something that most people can do full time, unless you have support of your audience, and that support has to come somehow, some way. But it's the relationship you have with the audience, and that is perpendicular to programmatic and mass media audio buys. It's not a very simple. I went through this. Literally, we set up a network. We switched to audio, video when YouTube came out. Went through the whole cycle. It doesn't work. It can. There are ways to, and we should do another podcast about it. There are ways to, I think, to make advertising supported media on a network level. But right now, there are 4.5, a little over 4 million real podcasts, podcastindex.org. We built, there's a whole nother story behind that, but you will not be kicked out of there. You're not deplatformable unless you break the law, a US law in this case. Of the 4 million, about 350,000 update on a regular basis within 90 days. So we're talking a much smaller universe, but still, of those, how many really are podcasting because they have a message to communicate? They have a relationship with their audience, and how many of them are trying to be influencers on a podcast to make money? I think that's a pretty big segment. And that's why it's just not working, because you don't have a platform, you don't have the algorithms, you don't have the platform working to promote you, to support you, and also to keep you busy, because that's what the algorithms do. Work, running the wheel. So we're down to a very small number of people who are very seriously podcasting because they have a message to communicate. Just like Substack, I think it's a great example. Substack is people who want to communicate. So writing is hard, and they have a mechanism for people to pay them. It's actually working pretty well. I don't know how Substack is doing as a corporate entity, but I know for a lot of writers, they're very satisfied with getting some money because the people who are reading their Substacks are supporting them. Advertising is just a tough sell in this one, and I want to make it work. I really want to make it work, but I don't see many avenues other than how do we build a large local network and have something come from the top that is appropriate for all of these smaller local podcasts.
Thank you for part one of 1,000 of these. I
like you a lot, Dan. I like sparring with you. This is fun.
I like you too, Adam. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, when I get to talk at a conference, I'll say save the live reads. And I think that the thing that got me in was I got into radio because I thought radio was so cool. And I got into podcasting because I'm like, this is the evolution of what we were trying to get to. It's better now. And I guess I didn't appreciate how deliberate you were in bringing that into being. I figured it was, more of you and some buddies screwing around and you figured out, some way to share the spoken word. But you've really been serious about this, and it feels like your whole life kind of led up to, and not to say that that's the only act in your
I think
story here, but
you're right. It is my act. It is my act, and there's more to come.
Well, and at some point we're going to talk about your faith conversion too. I want to talk to you about that. But I think we need to do a weekly show to even try to get through any of these topics.
I need more podcasts in my life.
You do. But no, here's what I will say. I believe that there are two industries, and one of them is the spots and dots and programmatic industry that's going to be lower value and work through exchanges and be very impersonal. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And then there is influencer marketing that is built on trust and authenticity and inefficiency. And artificial is the whole concept versus authentic. And what you've been a lifelong champion for is the authentic. And I think that commercially, there's actually a good business in the authentic, even though you have to set aside what everybody's telling you, which is you just have to chase efficiency. And so you have created a platform that I think has helped good businesses grow, has helped good voices and bad ones, but have the ability to work out their thoughts in a place that isn't controlled by sound bites and where you're not limited to a tweet to actually express something important, and that we can push back on each other. So thank you for your lifelong championship of core values that I really hold dear. And I think the implications downstream are very valuable commercially. And I think we both care a lot about this industry and want to keep pushing it forward. And I'm just grateful to be in the conversation with you. And, more things to debate and bones to pick, but overall, just fundamentally, I'm glad to be on this journey with you, and thank you for what you've done.
Well, Dan, thank you for inviting me. I would love to come back because we didn't even touch on podcasting 2.0, which I think does have some interesting inherent capabilities that may improve the mission that we're both on, although we come to it from different angles. I'd be very excited to talk to you about that and see if we can make the industry better. Because there has to be an industry for it to be professional. And I do want to help with that, even though I may not be interested myself personally in being an active participant, I feel there is a responsibility to also look at this group, this stakeholder group in podcasting, and service it as best as possible. So anytime you want, I'll come back and we'll dive into that. We might come up with something spectacular.
3.0. 3.0. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. All right. Well, thank you for going so long. I'll let you get back to your next thing, but to be continued. And thanks again.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you for joining the Media Roundtable. It is also, we're releasing this around our 11-year anniversary at Oxford Road. We started this 4th of July, 2013, which always worth bragging. We did that before Serial came out, when we were still explaining to people what a podcast was. And to have the guy that was really the driving force in opening this up as a platform and creating it is amazing. And so thanks for listening. And this podcast is and continues to be brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and to use your influence for good. That's what so much of this conversation was about. The fact that we are members of the marketing community with the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but also edify, and to build bridges across differences, to preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer and you want to get practical with all this, you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, talk to us. Our agency, Oxford Road. You can go to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. I think that's important. It's called The Influencer. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback on today's episode or any of our episodes. We want to keep making it better all the time. So reach out to us at info@mediaroundtable.com. If you haven't heard about Ad Infinitum, very important. It's the other podcast that we do. And by we, it is led by Stu Redwine, Vice President of Creative Services, one of the foremost experts on how to use sound to persuade. And he just did an episode with Hala Taha, who is an incredible entrepreneur with her own network, and just a great marketer as well as creator. And what she's building is pretty big. So listen to Ad Infinitum. It is really the foremost discussion of audio advertising and the actual creative that's involved. And most importantly, thank you to all of you for the time that you spent today, the time you continue to spend with us. Thank you to our guest, Adam Curry, and to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, Ezra, Mary Jane, Everett, Neil, the team at Sharp Pen, the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.